Out of his mouth goes a sharp Thracian sword, javelin, Thracian javelin, that was the word that's used in the Greek. That with it he should smite the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, and he will tread the winepress of the fierceness and the wrath of Almighty God. Now I'm going to remind you where else we've read about the winepress of the wrath of God. Do you remember reading that? I told you tonight we're going to be tying a lot of pieces together. Where did we read about the winepress of God's wrath? Anybody recall? Did I hear somebody say Revelation 14? Because if you did, you're right. Let's go back to Revelation 14. Now remember, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 are all these interstitial pieces that fill in the gaps. At the end of 11, it's telling us the end game, right? We went straight from Revelation 11, at the end of Revelation 11, straight into 19, because that's the storyline. But if you look at this interstitial piece in Revelation 14, by the way, interstitial, does that name ring a bell? Does that mean anything to anybody? So, for those of you that live in the Midwest, you've seen grain elevators, right? They're round, cylindrical tubes, right? Any place where you have two circles that meet, like this. I'll try to get my hand right online, I can't do it. Anyway, like that. You've got that V that's created above and below the two circles where they join, right? Well, if you put a wall across that, imagine a wall across that, it makes kind of a triangular piece, right? Grain elevators they can store grain in those if they want to, right? Those are interstitial. It means that they're between. It's like these pieces that fit in between the other parts that you're really looking for. You're looking for the two circles, but the part that's between there are interstitial pieces. So these storylines are kind of like in the middle. They're like filling in the gaps for us. It's detail. It's like watching. This is going to show my ignorance because I'm really not a sports-minded person. But from my vantage point, as I recall watching things like the Super Bowl, you oftentimes have two people and I might get this wrong, but I think it's known as play-by-play and a color player. Is that right? So you got one person that's like calling the game as it's happening, and you've got this other person that's kind of sounding off stats about fun stuff, right? So this guy or gal is like doing all the fun things. Oh, did you know he likes chocolate ice cream when he gets a fumble, right? And this guy is over here talking about and this guy's like, oh my gosh, he just fumbled. The other guy's got the ball, right? So you've got these two, generally speaking, you've got these two people who end up working as a team to make the experience more understandable and more relatable and more enjoyable. Well, that's kind of what we experienced here in the Revelation. We've got the play-by-play that's happening, and then we get to Revelation 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and it's like these index cards that go boom, 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 boom. We point back. We go, hey, remember we talked about the Whore of Babylon? Well, here's a couple of chapters about that. Remember we talked about the beast? Well, here's a little bit about that, right? So you get to Revelation 11, you've got these interstitial pieces that fill in the color, and then you jump over to 19, you keep going with the storyline. So verse 14, we're going to jump back here real quick, or chapter 14, we're going to jump back and we're going to look at these two harvests that happen. So starting 14:14, I looked and behold a white cloud. When have we heard the white cloud scenario? It's about Jesus at the sign of the coming of the Son of Man, Matthew 24. I looked and behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that had on the cloud, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time is coming for you to reap the harvest of the earth. It's ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in the sickle on the earth, thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. Period. We don't know anything else about that harvest other than it was done by the guy on the white cloud that looked like the Son of Man, which I think is the catching away of the church. It fits exactly with what Matthew 24 talked about. And another angel came out. Interestingly, by the way, if we look at what Paul wrote, Paul said at the last trumpet. Where are we at right now? Revelation 14 is inside the seventh trumpet. Because the seventh trumpet sounds in Revelation 11, You got 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 that are filling in the gaps for everything that we just finished reading in Revelation 11. We are in the seventh trumpet when this happens. Another angel came out of the temple also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, which had the power over the fire, and he cried with a loud voice to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, "Thrust in your sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe." The angel thrust in. Now this is the angel doing the harvest. The angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. The great winepress of the wrath of God. Now, hold your finger there. Let's go back to Revelation 19 and refresh our minds the reason we're there. Don't go. Keep your finger both places. Revelation 19 said, verse 15, out of Jesus' mouth goes a sharp sword, that he should smite the nations and would rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. Jesus treads the winepress. Now look here. Verse 19 back in chapter 14. The angel thrust in his sickle of the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even to the horses' bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs, which we said was 200 miles. And as you may recall, I told you that if you take that 200 miles and make a big cattle trough out of that's 5 feet high and 200 miles wide, you divide that amount of blood by 9.5 pints as the average, 9.5 pints per individual, you come up with somewhere between 235 million and 420 million people, depending on whether it's spilling over the edges of the cattle trough road. A minimum of 235 million people die in this experience in Revelation 14. That's a minimum. But the interesting thing here is that I'm left with the question asking, is it Jesus that trod the winepress of God's wrath? Back in Revelation 14, that happens in the seventh trumpet. Is it Jesus that treads the winepress of God's wrath? Because what we see is a sharp sword goes out of Jesus' mouth. That's what we just read. Right? He rules with a rod of iron. He treads the winepress of the wrath of God. Out of his mouth goes a sharp sword. Fierceness and anger and wrath of Almighty God. Jesus, having a vesture dipped in blood. This is a warring Jesus. In righteousness he doth judge and make war. This is not the mild meek Jesus that's eating fish on the side of the ocean with the disciples. It's not the mild Jesus who's allowing the Romans to crucify him. This is the Jesus who's coming to clean house, who's coming to defend his city, who's coming to defend Jerusalem, who's coming to his marriage. Jesus is coming to his marriage. This is how Jesus' marriage kicks off. He comes and cleans house. Who is he getting married to? Let's keep going. I saw an angel, verse 16. And he has on his vesture and on his thighs a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And I saw an angel, I got to tell you this. I saw that on his thigh the other day. I thought, that is so cool. So he has, and on his vesture, on his garb, his robe, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I'm imagining it probably King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But then I'm imagining Jesus with sweatpants on, and down the legs of his sweatpants, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, right? Because it says it's on his thighs too. So he's wearing something that's allowing the writing to be down his legs. I just see Jesus coming, and he is ready. He's in guard.